What we are talking about tonight is worrying. We are going to talk about how to stop worrying and really start living, or you can say it differently, how to really stop worrying and start living. So I think this worrying is a massive part of our lives, and all of us experienced worry, especially during 2020. But before I kick off with worrying, I just want to say something about matters of the soul and myself, just to introduce myself. I'm Afrikaans, so this is my second language, and I live in Pretoria, South Africa. My profession is a clinical psychologist. I have a private practice that I run, and I also then I've founded and I run this non-profit organization called Matters of the Soul. We have this Facebook page and YouTube channel, and on the websites, Matters of the Soul in Afrikaans, Sake van die Siel. I have various video series about clinical subjects, life coaching or life skills subjects, and family matters, and all kinds of things. So I've got lots of videos and audios and podcasts available. And you can go and have a look at those. You can also find Matters of the Soul or Sake van die Siel's podcasts everywhere, where good podcasts are stored or whatever, or shared. And I use Podcast Addict, or we use Anchor. That is a central site. And if you want to go there, you can find the podcasts. And we're currently busy with a series on perfectionism, and you will find some of the links on our Facebook page. Okay, so we are going to kick off tonight, and let me start with sharing something of my own life. As a psychologist, I'm acutely aware of worrying and what impact it has on my own thinking, but yet I sometimes struggle with worrying too. I know what it is, I know how to deal with it, but I still find myself falling into the trap of worrying. So it is not something that I've not experienced myself, that I've not sometimes battled with. Um, there are three main areas, according to myself, that I think people worry about mostly. The first area is finances, the second is relationships, and the third is health. And I think that those three areas are also the three areas that we mostly obviously experience difficulties with. That's where our battles lie. Even when you're in spiritual battles, you will also find those areas are the ones that are mostly attacked. So if you are battling with one of those areas, you are most likely to be challenged on your basic security needs. If you know the Maslow's hierarchy of security or hierarchy of needs, you'll find those three are in there, and they are basic needs, and if one of those areas are adversely affected in your life, you will find that it is quite a struggle. Now, the area that I've mostly battled with at first was relationships, and then later on in life, finances. And I'm still not totally free from any worry on those areas. I find that the worries shift from area to area. Now let's I'm going to share some of my testimony as we go along and throughout, because it's a story of learning to trust in the Lord. Now, I initially, in my personality, I've got an anxiety trait, if you would call it. I tend to be a bit more anxious, negative about life, the melancholy kind of one, or on the disc personality, the C for compliant or conscientious. I would rather see the pothole before I see the rest of the road. So I would tend to just gravitate towards the negative. But I've had to really work at that and work at my perception. Now we'll see as I cover this 1 hour of talking about worry, you'll see that I obviously cannot cover all of what worry is about. So I'm going to leave you worried that I'm not going to talk about everything that's worry is about. But don't worry, I'm going to give you the basics of worry. So we'll first of all look at what it is, and then why we struggle with it, and obviously how to deal with it. And I'll look from a Christian perspective as well. So as a psychologist, I'm going to try and give you the psychological inputs, but also then the inputs from a Christian point of view. So, okay, let's kick off with what is worry really then? If you look at the clinical definitions, what they do is they focus on your thinking, and they say worry, and I'm going to give you the highly clinical definition, and that would be where you look at anxiety disorders such as a general anxiety or generalized anxiety, because worry is actually a thought pattern that you find where people expect the worst case scenario. They expect bad things to happen, and they have thought patterns about concerns about the future that they are finding themselves cycling with. So they are it's as if there's a dangerous response in their mind that something bad is going to happen, and then they start to what we call ruminate about it. They start to think about it over and over, and that leads to more anxiety. So it's your thinking patterns that you are worrying about, and you are worrying about something in the future. Mostly we are concerned about something in the future or something in the present that might worsen, or that might not improve. So, but that is then again future based, because it's not about what is happening now. It's about where this will lead us, and then it's a way of thinking about that. So worrying it feels out of control most of the times. It feels as if you're doing something that you cannot really stop. It's hard to stop worrying, and that is because of the feelings that are attached to it. So the feelings that these thoughts provoke, and they evoke a lot of feelings with you. They let you feel anxious and fearful and concerned, and those feelings are quite strong, and they then trigger your autonomous your self-protection system, so that you are then heightened in your alertness, and that you are more aware, and you start to feel anxiety symptoms in your body, and that leads to more worry. And then what we do when we tend to fall into a worry cycle, what we do is worry breeds worry. So we start to actually see things that might give us evidence that there's reason to worry. So we find evidence to worry, and then we worry a bit more. And what the cognitive therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy says is that we find that worry it is based upon a certain type of thinking. So we'll have a look at the types of thinking that actually breeds worry and anxiety. And those types of thinking just is the process of thinking. So it's the pattern of how you are looking at the world, the kind of glasses that you are wearing. And that reminds me that I did not put on my glasses. But in any case, I can see you. You can see me, but I can't see you. So, but in any case, so that what that does is that we are stuck within those patterns, the frame that you are wearing. So what we'll do is we'll have a look at how you can change the way that you think. Um, but there's a whole lot to say about the differences between worry and anxiety and fear, because on a continuum you can think of worrying being here and fear being a bit higher or a bit more, and then anxiety, and then fear is here, and then phobias will be there, and panic will probably be the worst part of worry. So uh, if we have a look at then worry is because it's a common thing, isn't it? Most people struggle with worrying to some degree. I have heard people that have said to me, look, I've never experienced anxiety before in my life. Um, I don't really know how true that is. Is it really true? But some people tend to say they don't ever experience anxiety, but they've then probably experienced anger. So they don't, because they are anxious. So it's just that they are fighting against their environment because they feel threatened. So they anger also, and they'll justify it by saying, no, it's just because something happened that is wrong, but it's because it's threatened something there, and that threat uh, is actually a fear-based response. So, no, you have experienced anxiety. So worries, doubts, anxiety is a normal part of life. Whether you're worrying about that finances, or something that where you have to perform, that's another area, or where you are going to be judged. So whether it's a date with somebody or an interview, you are going to be judged and you might not be good enough. Now, what we find with worries is that you can find what we call normal worries. You know, worry is not necessarily bad, and that is where I want to just tell you the difference between concern and worry. Concern or general worry or a normal kind of worry is actually it's actually good for you because it gets you to get into action and pay your bills and study your homework and do your homework and do all those things, and it gets you to do the job. But when that worry turns into something where it is starting to affect your functioning, where you're not able to function so well anymore, because it feels uncontrollable, or it is becoming more habitual, and it's difficult to stop it, or it drains you. That's when you know it is no more a concern, that you're just concerned about this and you're doing something about it, or you're giving some mind space to it and you're thinking about it. This is now worrying, which means I am entrapped in a pattern of thinking that I'm circling all around, and I'm actually digging a hole in the ground for myself, and I'm just getting myself stuck. So we want to distinguish between concern and worry. But if you want to really deal with worries, I just want to say something about the worst case of worry. When you go into the worst case of worry, what you find there is that, so you've got normal worry here, it builds up, concern, and it becomes worry, and then it escalates into anxiety and fear, and at the end where you also get generalized anxiety disorders. So a generalized anxiety disorder is where that person is really struggling with anxiety, and it's excessive anxiety and worry, and it's an apprehensive expectation. So those people are nervous. They are constantly nervous about almost anything and everything, and it occurs more often than not, and it really it makes life difficult for them. So people with generalized anxiety have anxiety about going outside, social anxiety, being between people, anxiety about failure, anxieties about many things. And usually that develops over time, and it's also got to do with the way that they think and they deal with life, but it's also got to do with, there's also a medical element to it. But they've got a lot of irritability, difficulty concentrating, easily fatigued, they're restless, they're very on edge, they've got tense muscles, they can't sleep, so they're highly anxious. Now, there might be times where you have experienced this, especially when you're very stressed or you're going through a difficult time and you've got a lot of pressure. But this one is that it's where you've experienced this for at least more days than not, for 6 months. So then we know that becomes a generalized anxiety, and it's not due to a lot of other disorders like a panic disorder, or another other like anorexia nervosa, where there's anxiety about gaining weight, or the post-traumatic stress disorder. So anxiety is related to different things there. But here what we've just got worry, general worry. Okay, so worry it can be good for you if it is concern, but you don't want to be stuck in worrying patterns. You don't want to be stuck in thinking about stuff and worrying so much so that what it is doing is that it is distracting your healthy thinking and your problem solving, and it is taking up energy. And when you're in relationships with people, you're more stressed, you're more strained. So what I found is when we went through a financially difficult time, I had a lot of uncertainties. So uncertainties about whether I'm going to have enough money to pay the bills. I felt out of control. All the plans that I made did not really work. I was excessively anxious about the worst case happening. So I was thinking, look, I'm going to lose all the assets that I've got. I'm not going to be able to pay those things. And that was my worry. And what happened is I would then in my mind picture. I actually found this out later upon reflection back onto what I was thinking, because in the moment I was so anxious that my mind just said, but this is going to happen. This is going to happen. Oh gosh, goodness, it seems like we're going that way. It seems we're going that way. Can you see we're going that way. And then what that does is it just spirals out of control. So I was extremely stressed and worried. Now the intervention and that changed it for me. Well, I will discuss a bit later on. But let me look at some of the other areas of how you can stop worrying. Firstly, you need to identify what you are worried about. You know, worry sometimes can be very vague as well in your mind. It's as if it's floating a bit and we don't really know what we are worried about. So you need to identify it. The best thing that you can do is actually write a list of it uh, and lessen that fogginess and clarify why you are worried about things. And then what you need to do is actually identify your feelings associated with your worries. Now, this is difficult. It's hard. It might take some thinking. You might even have to speak to somebody to give you some, soundboard effects, or they can just reflect back for you, so you can hear what you are feeling. Obviously you're feeling afraid and worried, but there's anxiety, frustration, irritation, fear, anger, whatever it is. You need to identify the feeling, and there's an interesting reason for that, because feelings of fear make the worry seem more realistic. You know, it's as if it confirms for us, yes, this is real. This is really real because I'm feeling anxious about this. So it's as if your feeling confirms your thinking. You know, they call it the cognitive triad or the cognitive triangle, where it's the thinking that influences your feelings, that influences your behavior, and those three influence each other. But it's as if that feeling is so strong that it says, yes, this is actually a fact. And then we don't check our thinking because the feeling confirms it. Whereas we actually need to check the thinking. So you need to identify the feeling, give it a name that brings some control over it, and it helps you to distinguish between the feeling and the situation. Now, it's good to know I'm feeling anxious about this situation. In your mind, it separates the two. It sounds strange, but might seem, but what would that help? It's look, we're human. We we're strange, you know. We work in certain ways. It helps. Some help. Another thing is you identify the thought, and that's where it becomes a bit difficult, and where you actually need to write it down. So what I would used to do is I would take a page and then divide it into two, and then on the left hand side I would write all those anxious thoughts, and I will number them. And I'll write them as they come out of my mind. You know, you're not going to have enough money to pay the bills. This is going to be terrible. What if this happens? How is this going to be? Da 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 da. Because I would allow my mind to just spill it. What happens there is that it creates some distance between yourself and the thinking, because thinking is very close to you. Whereas when it's on the page, it's out of your mind and you can reflect back on it. Now you've got interesting kinds of thinking, and I'm going to give you some examples here, and that's where we link up with the pattern of thinking. Now listen to this. The feelings. Now we said it's fueled by thoughts, eh? And those thoughts are what we believe to be true about our situations. It's not necessarily true, but we believe it to be true. And like we know, we've got many of our thoughts that, obviously the thoughts that create worry are mostly unhelpful thoughts. Now, I've had situations where I thought this was a valid worry. It was a concern, but it became a worry. Like when the government, wastes money, on whatever, or there's corruption. It causes a worry, but then we'll look at how you have to deal with that. And some things are valid fears as well. If I stand I'm on a huge uh, highway, and I'm next to the highway, and I would just want to walk blindfolded across the highway, you're going to tell me that I'm stupid. So you'll probably, hopefully, stop me. It's because I would take a risk that is just totally silly. But if I tell you I'm so afraid I'm not going to do it, my fear tells me not to do it, then that fear is a healthy fear. So we do have fears and anxieties that help us. But if it becomes out of control and if it's not realistic or true. Okay, so listen to this kind of thought. What if I cannot pay the bills? That's catastrophizing. You create that additional stressor. by assuming a negative outcome and that a disaster will happen. So what that is you are assuming that something bad will happen. Or I won't be able to support my family. I won't be. It's like you're jumping to a conclusion, and you're playing it out to that negative end. You're causing yourself to think the worst case as the greatest possibility. But it is not necessarily so. It is just an option. So it's what it does is it shoots up your feelings. Your anxiety goes up to 60, 70, 80, 90 out of 100. And 100 is panic. So that's where your thinking goes. Whereas, or you could say, my family will be so disappointed in me. You'll assume that people will have negative reactions, and you'll feel afraid of them, or you'll say, I shouldn't have done this. I'm so stupid. I mean, I said that. Hey, I lost 400,000 rand, and I felt so angry about that, and I beat myself up about it for a year and a half. Shouldn't have done it, shouldn't have done it. We call that personalization. So you personalize it. That blaming of yourself says that you were the only person to blame. It was solely your fault. And it doesn't consider any other circumstances or variables. So it's rigid, you know. Or you say, there's no way out of this. I'm stuck, which just creates a huge situation of helplessness and stuff like that, where you run to the worst case and you create that thinking. So what we then want to do is when you get stuck in those kinds of thinking, like you can also magnify the negative aspects and minimize the positives. You know, is the glass half full, half empty? This one is 3/4 even more full. And but what we do is we easily actually do that, especially when you're angry, like at the government. We easily minimize the positives and maximize the negatives. The media tend to do that as well. They tend to ignore the positives and just give you a half-baked story, or the story is not balanced. So what happens there is that you find that your thoughts actually mostly go unchecked. And usually we just let these thoughts run. The way you can check your thoughts out is by what comes out of your mouth, because the proverbs also say that what the heart is full of, the mind is filled, the mouth will be filled with what's going on in the heart. So that is, you'll hear in the person's words and in the way they frame their sentences, and that's how they are thinking. So it's what they're thinking, but also how they're thinking. Now, what we'd like to do then is to act as a detective on your own thinking. And this is a process that is learned. It does not come by itself. Some families actually have this process embedded in their communication patterns, where they check each other's thinking by giving feedback. Now, this doesn't mean that you blame yourself and you're harsh on yourself and say, I shouldn't have thought that. Or you're harsh on somebody else that you find now, hey, you're worried about this, you silly. It's so we don't want to be harsh. We still want to be understanding, because we are human, and we don't want to be threatened, and we don't want to be in bad situations. Who wants to suffer? Do you want to suffer? Do you want to suffer? Ish. No, I don't want to suffer. Suffering is not lekker. It's not nice. So suffering, that's why the word gives us such a huge new way of thinking about suffering. It's like saying in James 1, count it all joy when you go through various trials, because it's not natural to count it all joy. It is unnatural. So it goes against the grain. You really need to have a very good reason that you are going to count this joy. Suffering is something that we naturally avoid. We do have some people that have lost hope, or that are so angry that they've lost self-control or self-respect, and they then hurt themselves. That's something else. But the general trend is for us to move towards comfort. And, you know, but yeah, people are not always logical. We find that. So you need to challenge your thoughts. So what are those questions that you can ask yourself to challenge your thoughts? It's something as simple as, can I solve this problem without worrying about it? Is it possible to solve it without worrying? You might be surprised. Many problems are possible to solve uh, without actually giving any worry. Or when you do find yourself worrying, you can ask yourself, does this worrying benefit me to prevent further problems, or does it and garner solutions for me? Does it help me? Am I now being concerned and proactively problem solving here? Or am I sitting and ruminating? That means I'm chewing this thing over and over and I'm thinking about the worst case. As I was, because I was really panicked about it. I did not want to lose the house and the car. And some of my friends actually did lose their house and car. And then what they told me is afterwards that, yes, it was bad, but we're still here. So even the worst case was not uh, so worse and so bad that everything was destroyed. And you've seen situations where everything was destroyed, such as in some hurricanes or tsunamis, and it was terrible. But people stood up afterwards, and you hear some beautiful stories, even out of the difficult, harsh struggles and dilemmas and trials. So sometimes the worst case might actually bring the most beautiful thing. So worry thinking is usually very rigid. It does not allow us to think of other possibilities, such as a positive outcome, or something that this going to the gym here is going to give me muscles. Going through this difficult time is actually expanding my repertoire of skills, meaning my way of dealing with life. It's expanding that. It is giving me more skills. Yes, I'm not inviting suffering, but it is a way of then saying, listen, what the worry is doing is it's taking my energy and it is distracting me from effective problem solving, and it is causing anxiety and stress. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rather use my mind space and the energy I have to proactively think about how to solve the problem. It sounds better. But even with knowing this, I would still find myself gravitating towards the worry. So I understand it's not so easy. It's as if it's in your nature to fight and flight, isn't it? Or freeze. So I understand that. Now I remember in my master's year, right before the oral exam, um, where they ask you, you sit before a panel of lecturers, and they 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 actually stress you on purpose. And then what happens is, I mean, I was very anxious before that, but what I told myself was, I'm going to do what I can do. I'm just going to try to be myself. I normalized my own anxiety and said, yes, it's normal to feel anxious when you're going to be in a situation like this, but that does not mean that I'm losing control or that I'm not going to do well. I am just I'm just sitting with uh, the possibility of failure. So I just said it's a possibility, but it's not a certainty. So I'm just going to try and do my best. And if I am going to failure, I will deal with it then. I'm not going to think about how I'm going to deal with it then. So you've heard people saying, I've seen a quote of Corrie ten Boom where she says, look, worry is taking tomorrow's problem and trying to solve it today. It is using up today's energy for something that you cannot solve tomorrow. The truth is that you can prevent a lot of problems by actively doing stuff today. But there are some things that you just cannot prevent, or that you cannot foresee, or that you just need to deal with it as it comes along. Now, another thing that you can ask yourself is, do I have any evidence that this thought is true? Is it really true that this is going to happen? And some people will say, yes, it actually happened. But then when it's happened, you deal with it. Then I know some people have had terrible swords hanging over their heads, like a terminal illness or fighting cancer or any of those things. That is hard. That stretches your ability to fight a worry, and it really puts pressure on this and on your foundation of where do I actually go to when I'm really stressed. So it is hard when when your life is threatened, and I understand that is the worst case. But even then, there will be ways of looking at the situation that might not just be the worst case. Now, I'm going to give you some Christian reframes a bit later on. Here is one. If I asked the Lord Jesus what he thinks about my problem, what would he say? What would he say? Now, obviously, it is your perspective on what he would say, and it can't go against the word. But you can also ask Christian friends, what would he say? What do you think he would say about this? It is good to hear other opinions. There's another one. Have I considered all other options available? Because when we're worried, we are so fixated on the worst thing happening, and we're so worried about how we are going to feel when this bad thing happens that we struggle to think of any other possibilities. Another thing that is interesting is, if I would advise a friend with a similar worry, what would I tell them? That's another role reversal. So where you are actually putting yourself in the help giver's role. And and am I making any assumptions about a possible outcome? Am I assuming? It helps to contain your thinking. It's as if you're holding back the horses. Say, whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's just deal with what we have here. Let's not run ahead of ourselves. And have I considered a positive outcome? Because it's possible, with God, all things shall be possible, and that are not possible with man. Have I asked the Lord for help? Have I waited for an answer? How am I dealing with this on a spiritual way? Now, here are some other new ways of really thinking about it. Now, this is an interesting one. So you will find with worries that you have a few ways that sentences start. The what ifs, those what ifs. What if this happens? What if that happens? In Afrikaans, we'll say sê nou maar, sê nou maar. Sê nou maar dit gebeur, of wat as dit gebeur? Dit gaan gebeur. We say this is going to happen. So what ifs really work? What we say is, if you can you can answer yourself, what if I cannot pay the bills? And that was a very real threat for me. I could have answered myself something like this. What if questions really rarely work? I'm not alone in this. The Lord is with me and he knows my needs. I'll ask him for support and follow his guidance. If I end up being unable to pay my bills, I will handle the situation with all of the agencies involved. My life will continue thereafter, and there will be other opportunities to prosper. It might feel like the end, but it will not be the end. But it will not be a nice experience. I'm not going to lie to myself and say this is going to be lekker. Yeah, it's not going to be lekker. It might be terrible, but I'm going to keep myself balanced in that. It helps if you can do that. If you run to the worst case scenario and you stay there, geez, you're going to get panic attack and extra stress, and you might smoke 6 packets a day. You'll go into fixing your worry, reducing the anxiety with something that becomes a depressant like alcohol, or something that depresses your central nervous system so that you can relax. Now, another way of handling worry is by, let's say, I won't be able to support my family. Here's another way to think about it. This situation might lead me to not being able to support my family, but the worst case scenario is unlikely. Chances are that we will get through this, but we might have to make temporary sacrifices. And that, again, won't be the end. Or when we say, oh no, how are we going to cope with this? What are we going to do? You can answer yourself, I might not know now how things will work out, but the Lord does. And with his wisdom, I will see what I'm able to do, and I will trust him with the rest. For every challenge, there is always some answer, especially with the Lord present. And there are a lot of truths with the Lord that you can then answer yourself with. A lot of the Word of God is then one of the answers that we go when we find absolutes. There's another one. My family will be so disappointed in me. You can answer yourself, if my family has reason to be disappointed in me, I'll endeavor to repair the relationships. But otherwise, it is not necessarily a given that they will blame me for things outside of my control. If they do, I'll take responsibility for my share. So can you see, you balance the thinking? Or something like this, I cannot do this. I don't know what we're going to do. You can answer yourself, I might not be able to do this, but God surely has an answer. I'll trust him all the way through until the end. I'll try to calm down, pray, and look at all the possible solutions. And I will do what I can. And if it's not good enough, I will get help. And if that's not good enough, then we've done everything we can, and we still cannot solve the problem, then that is probably not your fault anymore. Then you have to obviously deal with it. But then what else is there that you can do? You do your best, you trust God for the rest, and you are in his hands. What else is there then to do? Why then worry any further? Now, there are lots of other ways to look at this, and I can't go into all of them now. But then this actually then means that you need to change the way you think. But the most effective way, like I just said, is to go for the absolute. Now, usually with psychology, what they try and do is they try and say, look, you need to be able to deal with the uncertainty of life. There are lots of uncertainties in life. Lots of things are not concrete and or cast in concrete or cast in stone. It's not. A lot of things are not certain. You've heard this: change is the only constant, and we've seen this in 2020 that there's lots of change. And I don't particularly like major changes all the time. I like to go into routines. I like to stay in the same house. We used to move every 2 years, um, but that disrupts things. So I like to have certain things that are set and that are familiar for myself, and I try and apply those things to my life. But there are some things that are bound to change and that are very uncertain. And psychology then teaches you that you have to accept a certain level of uncertainty, that you just don't have all the answers and you just don't know. You will deal with it as it goes along. But as a Christian, you do have a higher degree of certainty because your faith is not in a person, a human being. Your faith is in God that came as a human being. That is difference. Your faith is in the Almighty, and He can do anything. He is everywhere. He knows everything. He is all good. So, and He loves you, and you've put your trust in Him. So that is a massive difference. And with Him, a lot of our uncertainties are certainties. So what you then do is you adjust your lens, is what I'll say then. As a camera, you adjust the lens so that you can ask yourself whether you are using the word of the Lord to look at your situation. Are you using the word, or are you contaminating the word with fears? And that's what I used to do. I used to oscillate between the word and my fears, and oscillate between the two. And that's also normal. It's a growth process. It doesn't just come overnight. Um, so, are you looking at your circumstances where, as if there's no God, or as if He's very distant or aloof? Um, or are you looking at your circumstances through the lens of the truth? Now, that connects us with Matthew 6. Yes, you knew I was going to talk about Matthew 6, the main section on worry, where Jesus talks about worry. And I just want to highlight something very important in Matthew 6, where He says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Don't worry about tomorrow. It has enough worries of its own. But He goes and He says, the people of the world run after things of the world because they're afraid they're not going to have enough. But you have a Father in heaven that looks after you, and that He's going to look after you. And if you know that He knows what you need and He loves you and He wants to give it to you, why do you then need to worry? And I think that is the key. It's about your relationship with Him then. So remember that, and we'll come back to your relationship with your Father. So let's look at another way that you can handle worry. You need to determine what you can do. So some things you can do, some things you can't do. Some things are outside of your control, and it won't be in your control. But then you do what is within your control. You've all heard Reinhard Niebuhr. Nou het ek vergeet. You've heard his poem on God Grant Me the Serenity. It's a beautiful poem. Go and have a look at the whole poem. The full poem is actually quite striking. And what we need to is we actually determine what we can do, and then we see that the rest is God's territory. Then another thing is then that you then give that over to Him. You trust Him with what you cannot do. He says that He wants to show Himself strong for those people whose hearts are undividedly, on Him. But how He wants to show Himself strong is through actively intervening in your life. How does an invisible God become visible? By doing things that you cannot do, where you directly trust Him. So it's a relationship where that's how God's going to become real to you. It's where you have a giant in front of you, and the giant falls, and great things happen. So you're not going to have God become. It's not going to become visible in your life if you don't have trials and tribulations. Now, I don't like to say that. I want heaven. I think we're all yearning for heaven, and I'm certainly yearning for it. But whilst we're here, we're going to learn about our God through the great things that He is doing in our lives, and that becomes a testimony. Now, turning your complaints into requests, that's an interesting reframe, because it means complaining is what we call an external locus of control. It's a victim mentality, some people would call it, meaning that you are saying things are bad and it's happening to me and I don't like it and I can't do anything about it, or I'm just going to blame those people because they're so bad, or I'm going to get back at them and I don't like it, and it's this negative cycle that goes on. Whereas a request is I identify a need, I am going to take ownership of this and I'm going to request it of the Lord. Now, I'm also going to deal with what I can do, but some things I'm going to request of the Lord, and I'm going to ask Him, and then I'm going to accept if He says no, or if He says later. Why? Because He loves me. So turn your cares into prayers. You've heard that one, but you trust Him based on His character and not your circumstances. So you trust Him regardless of the circumstances. Now, this is a choice. So what happens is you need to work with your thinking, and you need to change the way you talk to yourself. Meaning you say to yourself, self, you can even take a selfie as you do this and say, listen, this is the way, if you're going to worry about this, what it's going to do is it's going to turn you into the victim mode. Uh, some people are angry victims. They fight with others, and they're angry about people, and they take out their anger on them. That's also victim mode, where you have these offloads, these anger offloads. So what you'd rather do is rather identify the problem, and see what you can do about it. But firstly, go to the Lord. You know, go and trust the Lord in all of your ways, and lean not on your own understanding. It doesn't mean you take out your brain. It just means you ask the Lord. You go to Him and you surrender your life, and you surrender your choices, and you seek His guidance in this, and you seek His will. You don't have to ask Him, should I rob this store or not? Obviously. But what you're going to do is you're going to bring your mind to Him, and you're going to put your specific requests and surrender them to Him. And then you're going to wait on Him and follow His guidance. Now, people say, but how do I know what the Lord's going to guide me into? You'll know. He says His sheep hear His voice. You'll know. He'll lead you. Another interesting area of worry is that you need to distract your mind and relax your body. So you need positive distractions to break a pattern of worrying. I try to spend time in nature. Sometimes I just listen to beautiful music. I play games with my children. I just went for a walk with my dog this afternoon. And you go and cycle. I do all kinds of things, exercise, read a novel, do art, write a novel about somebody else's worries, or bless somebody else, or go and become involved in somebody who are less fortunate, or who is dealing with a lot more troubles than you. Because what that does is it just gives you the balance again. Oh, geez, I don't have cancer, or I'm not going through a divorce. We're struggling with communication, but we're not going, stuff like that, where it just gives you the other side of. I usually, when I'm so stressed about finances, and I try to then compare myself to people who have more than me, and I get stuck in that. And my wife will then tell me, why don't you compare yourself down to people who have less than you? Uh, and initially, I don't want to do that. I mean, I want to feel sorry for myself. Don't break my victim pattern here. It is good to lick my own wounds. But then what it does is it just infects them. So as I start thinking about that, the guilt comes in, you start to feel guilty because now you've been a whiner. And then and then I would repent before the Lord. And but as I'm doing that, I would realize, look, you're getting stuck again. There, that's why you're so anxious. That's why you're so irritated. It's because you're drifting. So, and it just jolts me back into saying, oh, well, wait, let's make a specific request here. Let's pray about this, and let's ask the Lord and cast it to Him. Casting your care to the Lord does not mean, just talking to the Lord about it. Actually means making your problem His problem. It's quite intense, but it's interesting. I'm going to have you go through some thoughts here of on what I said on some of the Christian view now. On worrying. Now, worrying is a sin, according to the word, and it's a sin, meaning that you are missing God's plan for you. Why, what would be the plan then? If you say, it's not like he dumps you into this big ocean and says, don't worry about sharks, and there are sharks all around you. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I mean, that would be cruel, you know. You're running, you swim, and you swim, you know, you're swimming and there are sharks behind you, and he says, don't worry, you're sinning if you worry. That's a cruel person that does that. No, if God tells you, don't worry, it's for a very good reason. Obviously, if he says that, then that means he is taking some responsibility for some things. Now, this is a relationship. It's a relationship with a person. You know, I've been married 20 years now, and it's an intense relationship. The two does become one flesh. They become one on all of the areas. And I am so involved with my wife. I can't live a separate life totally from her. Then I'm not married to her. That means with the Lord as well, we are so intricately involved he's so involved in our lives. And if he says I shouldn't worry about money, I shouldn't worry about anything on earth, Paul says, uh, don't be anxious for anything. That is a huge thing to say to a human that lives on earth. It's a broken planet. So if he says that, then there must be a very good reason not to worry. And the first reason is that you have a father. And if all this is just theory, then you are still going to worry. It needs to become experiential. It needs to become you that actually have um, tested the Lord on this. You have tried out this. You can't just hear this in church or whatever and think it's going to help you in the crisis. It's not. You need to exercise this. You see David, he killed a lion, he killed a bear before he got to Goliath. He tested his relationship, his covenant with the Lord, and he saw that, hey, I've got a covenant, and that means God promised some things in a fixed partnership to me, that he will do this, but I also have a share in this covenant. I need to do something as well. So with your worries, you need to engage your relationship with the Father. You need to come to him. Now he is God. Obviously, you surrender to him, but he has promises. He has riches. He has wealth. He has power. I'm not advocating driving Ferraris and living in huge mansions, and that. I'm not going there. What I'm saying is God wants to richly bless you to be a blessing. But he wants to help you. His power is available. He's not going to wipe clean. He's not a lawnmower God that just clears out all of the problems in your way. We've now already said that trials and tribulations are part of the gym of life. But if he says don't worry, then that must be for a very good reason. And then his promises come in. I'll be with you wherever you go. The Lord is my helper. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is a very present help in times of trouble. He's the Father that he will provide all of your needs richly, liberally. Promises that need to become reality for you. And how do they become reality? It's when you go to him and you talk to him personally, heart to heart, and you listen to his inputs in your life. So you've got a father, and then you've got a friend. Jesus says, you are my friends. It's different. Abraham was the friend of God. It's a huge thing to be a friend of. I'm, if you have somebody and you can name drop, I'm friends with Elon Musk or whoever. I mean, if you've got friends in high places, it makes a difference. But if you've got a friend in the highest place, he says you're his friend. So if you take him on his word and you build a relationship with him that goes two ways, you hear him. How does he feel? What is important for him? He listens to you. What is important to you? Then you start to form a bond, and then in there is an exchange. And if he calls you a friend, then that means he's already committed to a close relationship with you. So respond. Another thing is he calls himself your helper, which means he wants to help. He moves towards us to help us. So now it's important to see what he says and what he promises in this covenant so that you can respond to it and that you can engage it. Yeah. Um, people who believe that the miracles have ended at the time of the apostles are limited in their trust or in the way that they're going to see God work in their lives today. I have had money appear in my house. Not just 5 rand or 10 rand, 15,000 rand. So I've had that a number of times. I've had a number of miracles, really amazing miracles happen. So, and I've seen the Lord work incredible things. So you need to engage your helper in your here and now. That's how you're going to build your faith. And go and look for that promise in his word. He also calls himself your provider and your leader. So if he says he's your shepherd, that means to feed you, to guide you, to shield you. Does that mean you're never going to come into trouble? No, but if you're in the trouble, he promises to be there. And if he's not going to save your life and you'll be killed, then you're going to heaven. So the worst case scenario is already out. That's the worst is death. That's already been solved. So then you know that he's with you. So if he's not going to protect you, then I'm going to call on him. Um, I know a lady who had robbers running after her, and she turned around. She wrote a poem about this, die 13 letters van jou naam, Karina Stander, and she said, in the name of Jesus Christ, she rebuked the robbers and they fled. And it's about using the power and the name of the Lord. Then he says he's your strength. So if the Lord says something, that means he's willing to give something. Obviously, you need to engage and find out how is he going to give that? What does it mean? If he's your strength, and that means you are weak, you need the strength. So in that sense, when you are worried and you're anxious, you come to him, you do feel weak. You have lots of reason to worry on this earth, lots of things to be concerned about, and lots of things that will trigger your worry. You're definitely not on a safe planet. This place has lots of troubles. Yes, it's a beautiful place. It's got lots of wonderful things. It's a beautiful world, you know. Maar there's lots of troubles here. So lots of triggers for anxiety and worry. And then you have those as opportunities to go to the Lord and say, Lord, I'm weak. Lord, I'm worried. Lord, I'm anxious. And he will give you strength. So engage him. Use your stress and your worry to engage the strength and those things. And he says he's the Almighty God. And he's all powerful. So go to him and say, Lord, I need you here. And obviously, sometimes he's going to respond. He's going to respond very quickly. And sometimes it's going to take time to teach you to trust him. But he's wise, all wise. So he knows what he's doing. And he also says he's your protector. So engage him. And especially in South Africa, we have a very real threat to our safety. And it is something that I actively ask the Lord. But then I've had to learn how to trust the Lord and say, Lord, I want to rest in you. Because in the end, we want to rest in his ability. That does mean that you're not going to feel the ability. If he says in Joshua 1 that have I not commanded you, don't be afraid. I'm with you wherever you may go. I mean, you're going to feel afraid. If I was Gideon, I would be afraid. There's going to be fear, but it is then what do you do with the fear? So it means engage the Lord. And then after a while, you actually learn to trust him and you learn that you do not have to be afraid. He's really faithful. He comes through. So another thing that you're going to learn is that he's your peace. Peace is different from just a feeling of well-being. It means that you know that even though the bad thing comes, that I have somebody with me, or I have a reason not to go into the worst case fear scenario because I have peace. For instance, Judgment Day, you have peace when you have Jesus Christ in your life because he's not going to be your judge, he's going to be your advocate. So he's going to stand on your behalf. So it's a huge peace to know that you can come before the Lord without a guilty conscience. So, and then there's peace to know that if I'm going to be in the trouble, I can call on the Lord. He says he's with me. He says, call on me, ask me. You don't receive because you don't ask. Many times we don't know the word good enough. So we don't know. It's as if you don't know the PIN to your own bank account, so you can't withdraw money. Lekker nee. And then the faithful God. He's faithful. You know, I learned his faithfulness. Faithfulness means I'm not going to cheat on my wife, not because she's not cheating on me. I'm going to not cheat on her because I made a promise to her. So he says he's going to be faithful to you, not because you're so perfect and you're sinless. It's because he loves you and because he is faithful. He's going to be true to his own word. So that is a lot of relief. He's going to be faithful even though you are unfaithful. And faithfulness is something that brings glory to him. So you know he's going to be there for you. Is he going to take away all of the pain and the troubles? No, but he promises to be in there and to help you. And you will never be alone. I told my son one evening when he said he felt so alone. He was crying, and I said, "Why are you crying?" And he's lying in bed, and he says, "Oh, I feel so alone." And I went to him and I comforted him. And later on, I said to him, "You know what, son? You've received the Lord and you've lost the privilege to be alone. He is with you always. He says you are actually one spirit with him. So you cannot be alone anymore. And you can talk to him and he can talk to you. So therefore, he becomes your comforter. He will help you. He comforts you, and then you can comfort other people. So, but this is going to be a process of learning to identify the thoughts and to check them with the word and to check whether they are true. Are they true? Are they based on the word? And and are they realistic? Am I not running ahead of myself here? Or am I not talking fear into my own mind? Let's just stay rational with the realistic facts that we've got, and let's see where we can use our helplessness and our weakness to go to the Lord and rely on His strength and His wisdom, and all of it to serve Him and to love Him, so that it's not about me in the end. It's not about my comfort. It's not about my safety. It's about Him. Even if you go through persecution, and persecution is the reality of a lot of our brothers and sisters in some of the other countries, that's a hard thing. But the Lord says, I will bless you through that, and I will bring you honor in you because you're honoring my name. That's a huge comfort in the midst of some heaviness. So you need the Lord's comfort, and that reduces our worry. Sometimes the Lord has given me a word to say, this is going to work out all right. Don't worry. Initially, when I started studying psychology, I asked the Lord my first year, am I studying the right thing? Just confirm it to me. And I was at a prophetic evening, and somebody that does not know me at all gave me a word and said, you asked the Lord whether you're studying the right thing. And yes, you are studying the right thing. That was the first thing. And you are actually going to finish. Now, with clinical psychology, you do not know whether you're going to finish. You have to pass a lot of barriers. And before you actually you're going to finish. So 500 people start the course and 10 finish it. So you're actually going to finish. So that was a word the Lord gave me initially to calm my fears about the future. But now, if I did not trust Him, and I didn't always trust Him, I would forget about the word and just look at the circumstances and, am I going to make it? Am I going to make it? How do I know if I'm going to make it? I'm going to study 4 years and I don't know whether I'm going to make it. So I could really, and I did do that. And then I would remember the word and said, hey, but the Lord said this. Who's He? No, He's faithful. And He knows the future from the beginning from the end. He knows all of it. So if He said it, then it is so. And that's something that I want to encourage you with. So it's about looking at your thoughts, challenging them, and then in the end, it is about working with your thoughts. It's also important to also look at your anxieties and those things. I see some comments here that anxiety causes depression. That's for sure. Anxiety and worry can cause depression. In the end, when you are in a state of anxiety for a long time and you feel that helplessness can turn into a state of hopelessness about your situation. And yes, it causes depression because you feel overwhelmed and you feel helpless. And they do go hand in hand, they're brother and sister. Um, what I also want to suggest for you, if you want to go and look at the notes, I've got articles on my website, mattersofthesoul.org, and there you'll find articles that I've also used as a backbone or a spine for tonight's talk. This was lovely talking to you, and I'm going to have these talks every second Thursday evening from 8 to 9 South African time. That's GMT +2. So you're welcome to also share this page and share this video. It's a huge privilege to do this. Look out for all of our other topics that we're going to talk about. Something that's on my heart is addictions as well, and yes, addictions, and we're also looking at we've done some work on suicide and loss, people who've lost children, lost babies. So we've got a lot of those things I also want to talk about and share some things. So may the Lord bless you and may He help you to, in the state that you are worried at, and when you're worried and anxious, that you can turn to Him and that you can say, okay, what is there that I can do? But Lord, here's what I need from you as well. And then sit and listen. And in the end, realize that you are loved. All right, great stuff. It's been wonderful. And you're welcome to also send us some of your comments. And also, yes, like and share it. May the Lord bless you. Keep well. Cheers.